cold autumn light spilled through the cracked window. As a text blinked on my phone, my daughter told me I wasn't welcome at her son's birthday. Gerald Kincaid here, 57, retired craftsman. The smooth cedar rocking chair I built sat unfinished beside me, its gift tag still tied with worn jute twine. Ever had someone rewrite your story and expect you to stay silent? What would you do if your own family erased you? I was polishing the cedar arms of the rocking chair. I built for my grandson's birthday when her message came in. The chime from my old flip phone buzzed against the window ledge just loud enough to startle me into splintering the edge with the chisel. My thumb slipped, carving a jagged crescent into the grain. I stared at it a moment, half expecting the wood to bleed. The tag still hung from the upper rail, swaying as I leaned back to wipe the dust from my glasses. To Benji, may your stories be louder than silence, it read. I'd scrawled it on a leftover label from a spice rack project he'd helped me with last winter. Jute twine soft with wear, looped through the hole and tied in a crooked knot, his knot if I'm honest. He'd insisted we use real string and not tape like I used for grocery lists on the fridge. I blinked once, then picked up the phone. The screen was smudged and the light too bright in the gloom of the shop, but I didn't need to reread the message. It burned itself into the cedar shavings curling at my feet the moment I saw it. Miles thinks your presence might affect the vibe. We're going minimalist. Thanks for understanding. No dear dad. No mention of Benji. Just the vibe. For a moment, I thought maybe it was a wrong number. Maybe there was another J.R. Kincaid out there who also knew. A Miles also made rocking chairs, also happened to be standing alone in a tool-stale shed with numb fingertips and a half-warm kettle hissing in the distance. But I knew better. Eloin's texts always had that polished PR tone, like she was managing a crisis she wasn't allowed to acknowledge. Once upon a time, she scribbled poetry on diner napkins and read them aloud over burnt pancakes. Now she sent messages like she was trimming a press release. The chair creaked softly as I set the chisel down and stepped back. It was made from the birch tree I'd planted the week she was born. That tree had split down the middle during an ice storm 2 winters ago. And when the city hauled the halves to my driveway, I took it as a sign something fractured could still cradle something new. Each rail was curved by hand, the rockers shaped by the same jig I'd used when her mother was still alive. The seat slats were carved with care, each joint buttered with glue and aligned using a jig I'd invented on the fly. A small detail, but I'd measured Benji's favorite reading posture by tracing the shape he made on the porch swing the last time he stayed over 7 months ago, before Miles started picking him up directly from school. I pulled the tag off and stared at it. The handwriting looked steadier than I felt. I folded it in half, then half again, until it fit snugly in the drawer beneath my workbench. The drawer where I kept things too painful to toss and too fragile to display: old campaign pins, a broken slingshot, the instructions to Eloin's first Lego set, her 4th grade best imagination ribbon. My gaze drifted to the shelf above, a picture frame tilted behind a stack of old sanding discs. I hadn't dusted it in years. Eloin at 6, sitting in the first chair I ever made, cheeks sticky with jam, grinning as if the world would never change. I brushed the glass with my sleeve. The smudge streaked. The kettle in the kitchen screamed like it had been holding its breath. I ignored it. With stiff knees, I knelt beside the chair and ran my hand over the armrest. Still rough, needed another coat. But something in me stalled, like a truck engine gurgling one last protest before dying on a hill. I didn't want to finish, not this time. 30 years of projects, decks rebuilt, coffee tables for neighbors, birdhouses for kids who outgrew them before spring. I'd never left a piece half done. Until now. I stood slowly, brushing cedar curls from my jeans. I grabbed my jacket, then paused, fingers grazing the collar. I let it fall back onto the hook. The screen door groaned as I stepped into the evening. Ashland's wind carried that particular autumn bite, half wood smoke, half memory. The sun had sunk below the ridge, casting the backyard in a syrupy orange haze. I squinted toward the fence line. The birch stump still stood. The rest of the tree was firewood now, or furniture. But the spot where Eloin's tire swing once hung, that knot of twisted bark, remained. I remembered the way it spun in circles whenever she jumped off her laughter, chasing the tail end like a kite. I walked out far enough to see it clearly, then stopped at the edge of the raised bed we'd once filled with snap peas. It was overgrown now, choked with ivy. For a while, I just stood there. I couldn't tell if the ache in my chest was anger or sadness or something worse, resignation. I heard a creak behind me. The chair had rocked once on its own, maybe from the draft. Back when I was a kid, my father told me that silence was where truths got tired of waiting. I hadn't understood it then. I was starting to now. The photo came up in one of those 1 year ago today memories, the kind the phone likes to show without asking. There it was, the chair, my chair, but it wasn't mine anymore. She'd posted it last fall right around Benji's birthday. It had a filter on it, that kind that makes everything look a little faded and a little more curated. Her caption read Japanese minimalist with heritage tones. Clean, stylish. No mention of who built it. Certainly no mention of me. I zoomed in. The photo was cropped just above the leg where I'd carved the initials BT Benjamin Theo. I'd used a 3/8 carving gouge, the same one I used when I engraved Elowen's toy chest 30 years ago. I still remember how she ran her fingers over the letters and asked me why I made them so curly. She was 5. She loved curls then. I wonder when that changed. The kitchen clock ticked louder than usual. My coffee had gone tepid. I took a sip anyway, bitter and soft. Outside, clouds hung low over Ashland like smoke that hadn't decided if it wanted to fall or disappear. The fire in the hearth had dulled to a warm breath. I pulled the scrapbook onto my lap. It wasn't the kind with glitter or stickers. Mine was practical 3-ring binder, clear plastic sleeves, manila inserts. Each labeled in block print Benji, 2015, Rocking Lamb Benji, 2016, Puzzle Stool Benji, 2017, Tiny Toolbox. Every piece had notes how he reacted, what wood I used, even varnish type. For the chair I wrote, refused to nap unless rocked by Grandpa. Drooled on right armrest, called it Cloud Boat. That was the thing about gifts made by hand. They weren't just things, they were hours, days. The rhythm of the chisel, the tacky drag of a glue brush, the gentle sanding of a curved rung until it fit your palm like it was born there. I flipped to the envelope pocket in the back and found the printout. An old email from 2017, me and Elowen proposing to donate handcrafted benches to her old elementary school library. You carve, I brand, she'd written. Legacy build. She had liked that phrase. The email had no response. I'd looked it up later, her principal had never received it. When I asked, she said the thread must have gotten deleted. Funny how that happens. I traced the edge of the envelope with my finger, then looked back at the photo on the phone. She had shared it with so many hashtags, #heritage-style, #cleanlines, #family aesthetic. The word dad was nowhere. Neither was Grandpa. But what did I expect? Maybe that's just how things go now. There was another picture on her feed, Benji in the chair, curled up with a book. He was older than in the scrapbook shots. More angles to his cheeks. He looked peaceful. The filtered light caught the wood grain perfectly, but the armrest, the right one, the one he used to drool on it, had been cleaned up. Or worse, photoshopped. The smudge I'd never sanded fully, the one I secretly liked because it was his, that stain was gone. I stared at my hands, calloused fingers, a scar where I'd missed with the plane on a wet morning, glue lines that never quite scrubbed out. These hands had made a lot. They'd ruined a few things too, but mostly they'd built. Built homes, toys, hope. They only erase you, I said out loud to no one, if you were ever visible. I closed the scrapbook and leaned back. The chair creaked behind me, not Benji's, just the old pine one I used for meals. It creaked the same way, though. That kind of sound doesn't lie. And yet somewhere out there, a digital world had taken my fingerprints off the wood. My glue had turned invisible. My chisel strokes overwritten by font choices and branding filters. I stood up and looked out the kitchen window. The birch tree stood half bare. Last fall, I'd strung some paper lanterns around it for Benji's picnic. This year, nothing. Just the wind nudging the branches like it wasn't sure if it should wake them or let them sleep. Somewhere in the house, the kettle clicked as it cooled. Reverend Witt slid into the booth across from me, tugging at his old cardigan and nodding toward the laminated menu. They still do that sourdough grilled cheese, huh? I smiled, half out of habit, half out of the comfort that came with old friends saying old things. Still as greasy as ever, I said, tapping the rim of my coffee mug. The steam curled upward, lazy and slow, like the kind of day neither of us were in a rush to escape. The Pine Spoon Cafe hadn't changed in 20 years. Same cracked red vinyl booths, same chipped ceramic mugs, same overly sweet cocoa powder they dusted onto everything. The wall clock was stuck 2 minutes slow, just like always. You could count on that at least. Whit leaned back, hands folded over his belly, like a grandfather owl. Saw Elowen's post this morning, he said casually, as if we were still talking about sandwiches. Benji in that chair. Yours, I reckon. I nodded once slow. He pulled something from his pocket. Not a phone. Whit still used paper. A folded newsletter from the church's 2018 fundraiser. There we were, front page me, Janice and Whit, standing in front of the school library with 2 handcrafted benches between us. Benji was in my arms, holding a plaque upside down. I remember that day, Whit murmured, eyes squinting at the faded photo. You carried that boy like he was stitched into your chest. I took out my wallet, thumbed it open to the photo I always kept behind my driver's license. Elowen at 8 in her tire swing, sunlight in her hair. Whit tapped the plastic sleeve. Still carrying her in your chest pocket, huh? I didn't answer. Didn't have to. You know, he continued, voice lower now. I checked the fund's website last night. Your name's not there anymore. Not even a thank you. Just Miles and Elowen listed as co-founders. No Janice either. I looked down at my hands. The callus near my thumb had cracked open last week from sanding too long without gloves. Some wounds healed, others just deepened. Whit sipped his tea. You could let it go, or you could remind the world you were there. I'm not much for shouting. Then whisper to the right people, he said. Send the truth to someone who still remembers it. That stayed with me all day. Through the walk home, the creaking of the gate, even the hollow sound of the chair when I sat in it that evening. The photo from the newsletter sat beside my cup of tea. I opened my laptop. I didn't write much, just a single email. I attached a photo of the rocking chair, unfinished, half-sanded. Then I typed Ashland, 2018, not Kyoto. I sent it to 5 people. Janice, Old Man Kilner from the library board, Nora May from the Town Historical Society, my cousin Lena in Eugene, and Mrs. Claymore, Benji's kindergarten teacher. I wasn't sure any of them would even check their inboxes, but I hit send anyway. The reply came in minutes. Benji used to call it the moon seat. I still remember his laugh when it squeaked. Nora May stared at the screen, then leaned back, letting that warmth fill a space in me I didn't realize had gone cold. I reached for my phone to text back a thank you. That's when the notification popped up. Elowen just posted a new photo. I tapped it open. There was Benji sitting in the chair. Same pose as always, knees tucked, one finger holding the corner of a book. The lighting was perfect. The post had over 1,000 likes already. Caption, our little minimalist dreamer in imported comfort. My thumb hovered above the screen. I zoomed in. There was no imported anything. That was white oak from the Allenby Grove down near Medford. The glue I'd used had left a faint amber seam along the bottom rung. I'd signed under the seat with a wood burner, tiny initials JRK. But none of that was visible in the post. It didn't need to be. The narrative had already been written, by someone else. I powered the phone off and placed it face down on the table. Outside, the wind had picked up. The birch tree danced against the window pane, light flickering across the glass. I imagined it wasn't the wind moving the branches, but the stories themselves rustling, aching to be heard again. I never got close enough to touch the door. Just stood across the street, hands in my coat pockets, pretending the gallery's glow was sunlight. From where I stood, the place looked like a glass box of curated perfection. White walls stretched high and seamless, the floor a mirror of polished concrete. Inside, soft classical guitar trickled from hidden speakers. The notes sounded like something Miles would have chosen, measured, polished, sterile. It was Benji's birthday, his 6th. I hadn't been invited. Technically, the event was public, some sort of scholarship gala tied to the fund. But the guest list was managed RSVP only, and I knew better than to make a scene. I told myself I only came to see if they used the chair, and they had. It sat right in the center of the photo booth setup, framed by paper cranes and hanging bulbs. My chair. The same one from last year, sanded anew, re-oiled and captioned in a placard below Japanese artisan cradle, circa unknown. Minimalist comfort, circa unknown. I chuckled just once. The kind of laugh that doesn't feel like a laugh. Through the window, I spotted Elowen in a slate gray dress, sleek, architectural. She laughed with a woman holding a champagne flute. Her posture practiced hand movements as graceful as a conductor's. Every step she took seemed timed to avoid proximity to the chair. Miles hovered. Always a few feet away, never idle, never still. He talked in silences, nodded strategically, placed hands on shoulders like staging props. Every guest looked airbrushed in real-life coiffed men in slim suits, women in soft blush tones and rigid smiles. A projector beamed images across a side wall in rotation. Benji color-graded to glisten, playing with blocks, holding a sketchbook, laughing in the chair on a white rug, always composed. No photos before 2019. No snapshots of muddy hands. No birthday cake smeared across cheeks. No Elowen in jeans chasing a toddler through the backyard. Just clean lines, curated moments. One frame lingered longer than the others, Benji. Holding a tiny birdhouse, the wood still raw paint streaked by uncertain hands. I remembered that afternoon. We'd built it together the summer he turned 4. He'd insisted on using the bright orange even though it clashed with the yellow roof. The caption below the image read, "First Solo Project 2021. Not quite solo, but I guess names weren't needed when stories had already been rewritten. Off to the side, a woman stepped back from the slideshow. Her gray hair curled neatly under a lilac scarf. For a second, I thought it might be Janice. She tilted her head at the birdhouse photo, lips parted slightly. Then she was swallowed again by the room. No one noticed her pause. I stayed until the slideshow looped twice more. The breeze picked up, sending a stray flyer skipping down the sidewalk. It caught on my boot. The ink bled from the rain. Celebrate bright futures, the Benji Miles Scholarship. No Kincaid. I turned away. The walk home wasn't long, but each step felt deeper than the last. The rain began halfway back, soft at first, then steadier. My coat soaked quickly along the shoulders. I didn't rush. The water muffled everything, tires on asphalt, dogs behind fences, even the whistle of the wind through gutters. It was the kind of rain that didn't ask permission. When I reached my porch, I saw the rocking chair. I'd moved it there last week. The same chair, the one from Elowen's birth tree. The one now misnamed and misremembered. I stood a long moment, then stepped inside, fetched a small bundle of kindling from the shed. I lit the stove by the front window, not to cook, not to destroy, just to warm my own air. The heat crackled soft and low, wood hissing in short sighs. From my jacket pocket, I pulled out the folded tag, the one I'd written months ago and never given. To Benji, love Grandpa. Still creased, still legible. I placed it gently on the arm of the chair, let the warmth reach it. Outside the gallery, lights continued to shine through the mist. Bright, remote, clean. Inside, my hands hovered over the fire, rough and shaking. I didn't want to forget. I just wanted to remember without asking anyone's permission. They raised their glasses in that echoing gallery, but half the room had already left. Some drifted toward the exits, coats slung over forearms, murmuring half-hearted goodbyes to no one in particular. Others stood in loose clusters, staring more at their phones than each other. Miles tapped his glass gently with a metal fork. Once, twice. On the third strike, the sound cracked through the hush like a hiccup in a funeral. To Benji, Elowen said, lifting her own glass. The reply was staggered. To Benji, they echoed. Then silence. No applause, no music, just the mechanical whir of the projector cycling another loop. The guitarist, some young man in a blazer that didn't quite fit, strummed into the next piece, but his fingers caught on an off chord. The note bent sideways. A child near the back flinched, cupped their ears. "Why is Benji crying?" someone whispered. Elowen's smile froze. In the center of the room, beneath a faux cherry blossom tree strung with fairy lights, Benji sat curled up on the gallery floor. His knees were drawn tight to his chest. In his hands, he clutched a paper sketch charcoal, hastily drawn, edges wrinkled. The shape was unmistakable, the rocking chair. but his version wobbled legs. Mismatched shading dark where the joints met. Underneath in shaky block letters, Gramps' chair. Elowen stepped forward, voice pitched high and thin. Benji, honey, we talked about this. Benji didn't move. Miles hovered lips, tight eyes darting. He motioned subtly to the guitarist who paused mid-chord and began unplugging his amp. One guest standing too close to the paper cranes turned and muttered to another, "Didn't her dad build that chair?" The other shrugged, checked their phone and walked away. Another woman moved toward the gallery door, tapping on her smartwatch. Apparently someone posted a photo of the original, she whispered, with his name signed underneath. Elowen bent down, tried to lift Benji. He squirmed, let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a growl. "Benji, stop it, please." Her voice cracked. A wine glass crashed. The shatter echoed too loudly for a space that was supposed to whisper. Red droplets crawled across the tile floor like spilled ink in a poem no one wanted to finish. "That wasn't in the plan," someone said sharply. The room went silent. Miles moved quickly, whispering into a staffer's ear. A folding screen appeared from nowhere, propped up between the photo booth and the crowd. Elowen stepped behind it, carrying Benji like a bundle of wire. The guitarist packed up. The fairy lights dimmed. One by one, the guests disappeared quietly, efficiently, like pieces removed from a chessboard mid-game. No questions asked, only glances exchanged. Behind a sculpture pedestal, a child's drawing of the chair lay crumpled. No one bent to pick it up. Back at home, I stood in the kitchen holding a mug of tea I didn't remember steeping. The wood stove had died down to embers, and the house was quiet except for the tap of rain on the porch roof. I opened my laptop. The inbox blinked at me, teen unread. All replies to the photo I'd sent 3 days ago. Just one picture of the chair, just one line beneath it, Ashland. 2018, not Kyoto. Subject lines filled the screen, finally said. That night at the fundraiser, I remember. Still rocking mine. Bless your hands. I clicked the first one. It was from Claire, the art teacher at Benji's old preschool. She wrote, "I always wondered where that chair came from. I remember how it squeaked when Benji rocked too hard. I remember him telling the class it was made by his best friend Gramp. He cried the day it disappeared from the classroom. No one explained why. The next message was from Janice. I have the original plaque, with your name on it. I never threw it away. I closed the laptop gently, set the mug down untouched. Outside the rain softened, but inside something had started to shift. Not loudly, not with fire, but with names being spoken again, names not chosen for captions but remembered in real time. My porch wasn't lit by art lights or curated playlists. Just a citronella candle and a bowl of peach halves in syrup, the kind you eat with a spoon straight from the fridge and don't bother plating. The candle flickered in the soft September dusk, pushing back mosquitoes and pulling in moths. From inside, the scent of baked muffins drifted out oatmeal banana, my fallback when company might come, but I'm not sure. I wasn't expecting anyone. That's how I knew they'd show. At first, it was the Langley's Marcia with her laugh that wheezed like an old accordion, and Tom still wearing his County Parks windbreaker, even though he retired 5 years ago. Then came Ellie from the post office holding a paper-wrapped bundle. Your garden basil used to make the best pesto, she said, placing it beside the muffins. Thought I'd return the favor, sort of 20 years late. I smiled, held the screen door open. No RSVP needed. They came in 2s and 3s. No one asked about chairs or parties or gallery spotlights. They just came. Someone joked I thought we weren't invited anymore. I said, guess I forgot to close the porch. The bench under the bay window filled first quilt over knees, paper cups of tea passed hand to hand. I brought out the old scrapbook, the one with the cracked spine and corners softened by time. Laid it on the table like a guest of honor. Inside were pages Benji had helped decorate with crooked stickers and too much glue. One page just had his thumbprint in dried Elmer's labeled in my handwriting. First time using the nail gun with supervision. Everyone chuckled at that. Someone brought up the Pine Moon Rocker story again. My boy still hums that little song you sang about it, she said. Says it helps him fall asleep. We sat in easy silence for a bit. No ambient playlist. Just the creak of someone's knee, the muffled hoot of an owl somewhere near the back lot. Then from the shadows by the steps came Mabel. She held a stool in both hands, wobbly paint-chipped one leg, replaced with a mismatched slat of cedar. "You made this for me in '96, she said. "It split when I stood on it to change the bulb, but I keep gluing it back." I ran my fingers along the grain. My initials were still there, tiny, under the seat, burned with a solder tip I'd borrowed from the middle school shop. "Still holding you up?" I asked. She smiled. "Enough for sitting, not for climbing." Later, someone raised a mug. Nothing fancy, chipped enamel, and offered a toast. To the spaces he leaves behind, he said for the rest of us to sit down. I looked around. None of it matched. There were picnic chairs and folding stools, an ottoman someone dragged in from their trunk. But it all held. A little girl wandered too close to the rocker. Her elbow bumped the armrest, and the whole thing tipped, then fell, clattered against the porch boards with a hollow thud. Everyone turned. She froze. "It's all right," I said. I walked over, bent down. My fingers brushed the splintered edge where the side slat had cracked. For a moment, I just held it there. No rush to fix. I smiled. Elowen didn't say she was sorry. She just asked, "Can we borrow the chair for a few days?" I was in the workshop, sanding the armrest that had finally split under the weight of a dozen years of little hands. The smell of fresh pine dust mingled with the faint hum of classical music coming from the old radio perched on the shelf. Bach's cello suite, slow and deliberate, felt like a balm to a day already heavy. When she stepped in, her footsteps were hesitant, like a cat navigating a room that once belonged to someone else. She looked down more than up, fingers fiddling with the edge of her jacket. Benji trailed behind her, his small hand gripping the chair's arm, as if it was the anchor holding him steady in a shifting sea. Before she closed the door behind them, Benji kissed the side of the chair, a soft sound barely audible, but enough to still my hands mid-sand. Elowen started, then stopped. Her words tumbled out unpolished and uncertain. "Benji." He found the scrapbook online. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He asked me about it, about you." I didn't interrupt. I didn't have to. The weight in the air said more than any argument could. So I kept working, letting the worn wood smooth beneath my palms. The chair wasn't just a chair anymore. It was a vessel holding memories, quiet protests, and maybe a small hope. Before she left, Elowen looked back, eyes meeting mine briefly. "I remembered something," she said, voice catching slightly. The sound of that squeak. "It used to mean dinner was ready." "Benji says it's like the moon's hugging him." I nodded. No words were needed. The chair had stories of its own stories she was only beginning to hear again. That night, the quiet was punctuated by the soft thump of paper sliding under the workshop door. Curious, I picked it up, an envelope taped shut with careful precision. The ink on the front was smudged with sweat, as if the writer's hand trembled with each letter. Inside was a small piece of paper scrawled in childish handwriting, "Thank you for my moon." I sat back, holding the note like a fragile promise. The chair, scratched and worn, now carried something new. Not just wooden nails, but a tether between past and future, an imperfect bridge halfway back. Benji climbed into my lap without a word. The old rocking chair groaned softly under his weight, as if waking from a long sleep and remembering all the times it had cradled laughter, tears, and quiet moments. The morning fog lingered around the porch like a gentle veil, blurring the edges of the world into soft grays and muted greens. The scent of pine from the chair mixed with the faint aroma of brewing coffee, warm and bitter in the chilly Oregon dawn. I wrapped the faded quilt around my knees, its threads loose but familiar, like a silent witness to all the years that had passed. The chair beneath me creaked gently with every small shift, its wood worn smooth, in places cracked and splintered in others. Benji's breathing slowed deep, and even as sleep pulled him further away from the waking world. His small head rested against my chest, and he murmured words that I couldn't quite catch, stories of the moon's embrace, or dreams spun from his imagination, soft as the fog that wrapped us. Inside the house, I heard the door open quietly. Elowen stepped out onto the porch, her footsteps light on the wooden floorboards. In her hand, she held the original gift tag I had tied to the chair so many years ago. The jute twine now frayed, but the paper carefully unfolded, its edges crisp and clean, as if it had been waiting patiently for this moment. Her eyes shone with something unspoken regret, perhaps, or the quiet hope of mending old fractures. She didn't say she was sorry. Instead, she simply asked, her voice low and steady, "Do you still have that old glue?" I looked down at Benji, his peaceful face framed by soft curls, and then back to the tag in her hand. "Yeah," I replied, my throat tight but my voice calm. We stepped inside together, the familiar creak of the floorboards beneath us. I reached for the small glass bottle of glue on the workbench, a relic of my many years in the shop. The bottle was chipped fingerprints pressed deeply into its surface, worn by time and countless repairs. It smelled faintly of pine and something older, like patience and persistence. Back on the porch, the fog was lifting slowly, pale shafts of sunlight breaking through the mist and casting dappled patterns on the wood. I set the chair down carefully and examined the small crack near the base, worn deeper by years of use and neglect. Elowen knelt beside me, her hands trembling slightly as she steadied the leg, her fingers tracing the worn grain like a lover rediscovering a familiar touch. The glue was thick and slow, setting its scent sharp and chemical in the cool morning air. We worked together wordlessly, the only sounds the distant chirping of birds and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. There was no music, no words, only the quiet conversation of hands and the steady ritual of mending. As the glue began to set, a warmth spread through me, gentle and profound. This chair was more than wood and nails. It was a vessel of memories, a symbol of what had been lost and what might still be saved. It was a bridge between generations, between wounds old and new, between the silence of absence and the hope of presence. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded tag, placing it gently in the porch drawer, the same drawer that held other tokens of time. Worn photographs, dried leaves from the old birch, a faded letter from a long-past friend. It was as if I were tucking away the past, carefully holding it close, without letting it weigh me down. Benji stirred in my lap, stretching small fingers toward the quilt. I wrapped the fabric more tightly around us, feeling the rough weave against my skin and the steady rhythm of his breathing against my heart. The morning sun grew stronger, casting long shadows that slowly retreated into the day. Elowen sat quietly on the porch step, watching us with eyes that held unshed tears but no words. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She simply shared the space, no longer a stranger, but not yet fully home. For a moment, the three of us, grandfather, daughter, grandson, were just people on a porch connected by something deeper than speech or gesture. The day stretched ahead, full of promise and gentle light. Outside, the birdsong grew louder, the fog dispersed, and the world began to turn once more. The chair, old and worn, stood firm beneath us, scarred but whole, a quiet testament to endurance and healing. The porch was quiet now, the repaired chair resting solid beneath the soft morning light. The faint scent of pine mingled with fresh coffee, carrying a subtle promise of new beginnings. That old cracked wood, once broken, now held steady, much like the fragile bonds we all try to mend in life. Sometimes the hardest fractures lead to the strongest restorations, teaching us that healing often comes quietly and without fanfare. If you've ever faced a moment where everything seemed lost, did you find a way back through the cracks? I'd love to hear your story.